So in the next part, we're going to introduce something quite cool. We're going to try get the color going that you've seen in the kind of original spiral. As you can see, it's looking far more colorful than our boring black spiral at the moment. And we're also going to randomize the spiral. So we're going to create it in such a way that every time we run it, we're going to get a different spiral. And that's going to make this quite pretty and quite interesting to see. So let's see how we do that. The first thing we need to kind of just finalize is understanding what are the variables here that are changing, right? In the sense, we have two variables, radius and angle, and then every time we're changing them by a certain amount, and then a point is being plotted somewhere on our canvas according to our current radius and our current angle. But now we could also make a variable for these bad boys, right? So what we're changing radius and angle by, right? If we change this by 21 or 25 or 107.64 or 2107.64, oh, that's cool. Damn. Okay. I have no idea what's happening there, but that's really nice. But we can figure that out. We can make variables for these, right? So let's try that. What we can say is instead of we can make a variable called radius inc, right? So radius increment. We can maybe type it out all the way, radius increment. And let's make that 1. And we can say let angle increment. Make that 1. And now we can, instead of just saying plus a number, we can say radius increment and angle increment. Oh, wrong way. Angle increment, radius increment. Now, if I hit run, we're going to get a spiral according to these two parameters. Now, the spiral is a function of these two parameters. As we change these two, right? This is the starting angle, so we can change where it starts, but these two are ultimately going to determine the pattern of our spiral. So if we make this like 1.76, we're going to get a different spiral to if our thing was 1. And if we make this 0.5, we're going to get a different spiral. So every time we change these, we're going to get a different spiral every time. We can maybe, oh, that's so cool. We can decrease this a little bit. Let's increase the angle, just so we start to see, we can see the drawing kind of still happening. All right, so we could now randomize these variables. So instead of us changing them every time, we can let the computer create some random variable. And the way we do that is really easy. We just say random, and we give this function called random two numbers, the minimum and a maximum. And the computer is going to generate a random number between those two boundaries. So if I say 1 and 10, it's going to give me a random increment, random number between 1 and 10. And if I say, I don't know, 20 and 60, it's going to give me a random angle between 20 and 60. So every time we're changing according to some random stuff. So now you'll notice, I'm going to hit run. Oh, yes. Okay. So this is actually useful. So we get an error saying random is not defined. The reason why this is happening is actually because of the way that P5 works. This variable, random, only works, or not variable, this function is a function within P5, and we only have access to it inside of draw or inside of setup. We don't have access to it globally like this. So if we're wanting to access it, now this is only with P5 for this particular function and other P5 functions. With other kind of things, doesn't necessarily work the same. So you just have to kind of test it. So the way we have to get it to work is we need to declare these variables. It actually doesn't matter whether it's before or after setup. So we can maybe just keep it there for now. And then inside of setup, we need to set it to a random variable. So radius increment is equal to random between, we said 0 and 10. And let's say angle increment is equal to random between 20 and 40. We hit run. And now we're going to get a different spiral every time we run this code. And you can see how every time it's a little bit different. You can see like the sort of ranges that we're getting, right? So when our radius is just too big, we're not going to be getting the kinds of nice spiral patterns we want. So we're needing to kind of decrease our radius. So our radius increment. Maybe we can go between 0.01 and like 3. And you can play around with different ranges and see the kinds of triangles you end up getting. Let's as well do something similar, 0.01 to 3. And we hit run. And now every time we're going to get a little bit more of that kind of, and it's interesting. So we getting like a pretty repetitive pattern that's currently forming. Maybe, oh, there we go. And all of a sudden it's like completely different. If we change our thing, maybe 45 to 90 for angle, let's see what happens. Right? Every time we're going to get something quite funky. So we get these different spiral patterns that starts to form. And typically, I'd imagine if we decrease, because our radius increment defines how close all of our points are, if we decrease that, we should always get a more dense spiral that ends up forming. Yeah, and we can see that coming on now. So cool, man. The question is, okay, cool, we've gotten our random spirals. How can we generate the colors that we were seeing here? Here we're seeing all of these colors which are forming. We could also maybe decrease this just because it's going too quick. We're not actually seeing it like expand nicely. That works nice. So now we know that colors work according to the RGB color system. At least that's one way to describe it. So with point, because we're talking about a border, we're not talking about like the inside of it. We're going to use stroke in order to define its color, as opposed to fill, because fill defines the color inside of a shape. Stroke defines the border of the shape. And we can put our RGB value here. So whatever, 100 for red, 125 for green, and 32 for blue. And we get a particular pattern. But what if we wanted kind of random colors? Well, we could go random over here inside of draw. And because we're inside setup or draw, we have access to this function random. And we know that colors go from 0 to 255. So we can change that for red, green, and blue. And now we should get pretty much what looks like the neon cat vomiting out a rainbow every time a spiral comes about. So we're getting these colors, but it's always kind of a similar color. What you'll notice with this one is that the colors are a little bit more interesting. Let me change angle. Let's see if we can't get like one of those very cool spirals to form, like something like this. Like every time you're noticing it's a little bit different, the color. And that's because here we're actually also randomizing how much we're changing our red, green, and blue. So instead of going random every time, we could do something like this. If I said, let red, I started at 100, let green, I started at 50, and I say let blue, and I started at 10. In here, I can put my red, my green, and my blue. So it's going to be these values that we're defining over here. So now I hit run, we're going to get whatever that particular color is. And if I say red plus plus, green plus plus, blue plus plus, so plus equals 1 every time, then we're going to get like this gradient. Oh, what happened? Oh, it went white. It's so interesting. So the thing ended up going white because when it gets to the end, right? Because when all red, green, and blue is 255, the color is white. So we actually need a way to reset it when it gets too big. So if I say, if red is greater than 255, we want to reset it. Red is equal to 0. If green is greater than 255, we want to reset it. Green is equal to 0. And if blue is greater than 255, blue is equal to 0. So every time it will reset that color. And now we should get a pretty consistent kind of pattern that ends up forming from this. However, we could as well, currently, we're incrementing by 1 every time. We could make these random values as well. And that way, every time we're going to start at a different color. So if we randomize where we start and we randomize how much we increment by, we're going to get these different like a variety of different colors that come to life. So I'm going to make three new variables. I'm going to call it let red ink for red increment, let blue increment, and let green increment. And I'm going to take away the initial values over here, right? So you're just creating a variable as a placeholder, and now we're going to define all of them in terms of random values. So, oh, this shouldn't be red ink. There we go. So we're going to say red is equal to some random color between 0 and 255. Green is equal to some random color between 0 and 255. And blue is equal to some random color between 0 and 255. Then as well, we're going to do it with red ink is equal to some random color. Now we can decide, we don't want it to be too big, because if it's like 255, if our value for our red increment is 255, then red is always just going to go from like 0 255, 0 255. We're not going to get like a spectrum, so we want to make it smaller. So maybe something like 0 to 30. And then similarly for the other two. So I would copy paste red ink, blue ink, green ink. And we are going to save that. And now over here, we're going to say, instead of red plus plus, we're going to say red plus equals red ink. Green plus equals green ink. And blue plus equals blue ink. Now every time we should get a random pattern. Oh, what seems to be the issue? Let's see if we cannot figure out what's happening. I don't think it's the ordering. That won't make a difference. Oh. Wait, but now why is it all black? We're not getting an error. And it's all coming out to black, which tells me that something's going wrong with the color. So let's try. So we're going to try debug this. So what I'm going to try and do... Random. It all looks fine. I'm not getting an error. If I just say console.log and I say red, green, and blue, let's make sure that we're getting values for those. Ah, there we go. Cool. So we can see that green, we're getting this weird thing, NaN, which actually is like JavaScript 4, not a number. So let's see, there's something going wrong with green. Why would green be going weird? Why? Well, I said blue ink, green ink. Oh, there we go. It's strange that it didn't throw an error. Oh, okay. Spelling. So here we have green ink, here we have green ink, and here we have green ink. So we need to change all of these to green ink. So you can see how there's a little error like that could like throw you off. And notice what we did in regards to trying to print out the values of red, green, and blue in order to find it. Okay, now we should get something cool. We're still getting black? Oh, why were we getting black? Okay, so I have found the problem. All we were doing is that we were calling stroke after point. And what that does is, because we're doing push and pop, by the time we get back to pop, so when we say pop here, all the changes we make get we get reset. So the stroke over here was 0, 0, 0. So at pop, it's going to reset it to that. So by the time it gets to point here, the stroke is 0, 0, 0, and then we're changing it. If we put it simply before, then we get our desired effect. And we start getting these different spirals that are following these different shapes. And yeah, you can just see how bloody cool some of this stuff is. And it looks quite fancy with all these numbers going on at the bottom here. All right, so that is spirals. Really simple stuff. Went over all the things from kind of translations, rotations, transformations, random numbers, angles, a lot of simple stuff, but to create something so beautiful and so like apparent and common in nature and in the world around us. So with that being said, I hope you all have a phenomenal day further, and I'll see you around for the next project.